So how are we doing so far? Is any of this material new? Raise your hands. This is the first time you've heard any of this stuff. So this is old hat for everybody. First time maybe you've heard it put together this way. Yeah, I've realized later in life that my high school actually prohibited people in the going to college track from taking two of the most important courses I could have taken. We were not allowed to take typing because that's what stenographers did. You probably don't even know what a stenographer is. And you were not allowed to take home ec because you had to take other things to be prepared for college. And I think that's probably still true today in most high schools, is that people that are bound for health professions probably don't get offered or suggested to take home ec. And yet a lot of this, there are many people that already know this. So my module's called The Slippery Truth About Cooking Oils because my talk, the other talks have been largely about food, and mine is really not about food per se. Mine's about oils. I mean, wars have been fought over oils. Wars have been fought over salt. And wars have been fought over sugar. So we're talking about elements here. So as you listen to my talk and the others, always remember ice cream and crime in Detroit. So, Sociology 101. My wife goes back to college later in life and is taking Sociology 101. And the first question they had was this study that showed that the per capita ingestion of ice cream rose coincident and identical to the crime rate in Detroit. Okay, so it's a food and a consequence, an outcome, crime in Detroit. So just think about that. So oils, there they are. How do you guys choose? I mean, you've been to the supermarkets, you had to pick an oil. How do you choose? Anybody?
It's on price base.
Price. Okay.
Not a vegetable.
Not a vegetable oil. Anybody else? So do you think at all about whether it's saturated or unsaturated? And you know what a smoke point is? Does that influence your choice? Taste? We're going to have an oil tasting party here. Tasteless and cost. So lots of those things apply. So just to get a global view of this is the world consumption of vegetable oil. And you can see that palm oil and soybean oil are the tops. Rapeseed oil is number 3, and then everything else has a very small share of the market. I was most surprised to see olive oil has a really skinny area of the market. Does this surprise anyone?
Is that by people or is that by?
This is by like billions of gallons.
So you don't know if people are buying this? Or
No, this is human consumption. Human consumption. So we're going to talk a little bit about the good chemistry of oils. You know, why we use them. So oils are mostly fats. They're a great calorie source. The most caloric dense product we have are fats. 120 calories per tablespoon, regardless of what kind of oil you're talking about. So if you're on Survivor and you have to pick a few things, and a jug of oil is one of them, grab it because it's got the most calories of anything you can grab. It conducts heat better than water and at higher temperatures. So this is obvious, but you don't think about this. So how hot can you cook a food in boiling water? What's the temperature? What? 212. Can you make boiling water get any hotter than 212? Absolutely not. It's not possible. So for decades and centuries, man has cooked with oil because you can get oil to a higher temperature and cook things that you can't cook at 212 degrees. Try boiling your roast and let someone cook it in another way and see who finishes first. It also keeps meat from sticking to pans. This is kind of cool. So if you have a hot skillet and you throw a slab of whatever meat on it, actually there's chemical bonds that form between the aluminum or the iron and the protein. And it's not just that the meat like sinks into the pores of the pot, but there's actual chemical bonds that form there. And if it sticks, it's not very cool because you leave behind a whole layer of your high-priced meat. So we've used oils to form an interface between the pan and the meat. And the oil heats up and transfers heat to the protein, and then the protein, quaternary structure of the protein folds on itself and doesn't make those bonds available to stick to the pot the rest of the meal. We also use it for taste and seasoning, although sometimes you don't necessarily want your oil to taste like anything. Like in baking, you want a birthday cake to taste like a birthday cake, not like a macadamia nut. It makes food moist. So why is fried chicken so desired? Because it's so much more moist than a chicken that's, you pluck the feathers off and cook it over an open fire spit. You're not going to have a very dry chicken versus a moist one. And it extends the shelf life of food products, as I mentioned earlier. So this is what's in a cooking oil. We have triglycerols, or AKA triglycerides or fats. You've heard about flavonoid polyphenols. There's some pigments in some of them. There's vitamins, especially the fat-soluble ones. Surprise, surprise. Vitamin K and vitamin E. Free fatty acids, that's not necessarily a good thing. And some peroxides and oxidation products, that's not necessarily a good thing. So real quick lipid review. This looks in lipidology, acetylcholine is kind of like the center of the wheel. Acetyl-CoA. I just remember acetyl-CoA as being something that was in the pyruvic acid glycolysis cycle we had to memorize, and it's kind of like jump-starts Krebs cycle somewhere. So we learned this whole thing about glucose to pyruvate down to CO2, water, and energy. But it does a lot more. So it interacts with fatty acids to form triglycerides, interacts with fatty acids to form phospholipids, eicosanoids, which are involved in the inflammation process. Also swings over and forms cholesterol, which forms many of our hormones. So it is a key player in all that. And what is a lipid? Well, it's a glycerol over there on the left. And you have free fatty acids, and 3 free fatty acids hook on to the glycerol, and you get a triglyceride. And things are different because of the different free fatty acids that hook on. So I know most of you slept through lipids in biochemistry because it was the easiest thing that we had to learn. It was just these straight chains of carbon. It's like, okay, got that, move on to something else. So here's an example of a saturated fatty acid, stearic acid. All carbons, no double bonds anywhere between the carbons. Oleic acid, over on the left, has 1 carbon bond, so it's a mono, unsaturated fatty acid. And then a polyunsaturated fatty acid, here's an example, is linoleic acid, because it's got 2 carbon bonds. And they happen to be in the cis position. So remember cis and trans? It just so happens that Mother Nature likes to put out fatty acids in the cis formation, and not very often in the trans formation. So this is a rather busy slide, but it shows in the red is the amount of saturated fat in any given oil, and the blue is the amount of linoleic acid, which is a polyunsaturated fat. Alpha linolenic acid is the brown, and then the oleic acid, the monounsaturated, is in that. So you can see the fats vary quite differently in their fatty acid composition. And what does that mean? So let's take a look at the saturated ones. There's stearic acid, which has 18 carbons, and there's a 0 there because none of them have any double bonds. It's also what's called a long-chain triglyceride. And there's a lot, it forms a third of the fat in chocolate. Palmitic acid, which is obviously by the name, the predominant fatty acid in palm oil. Lauric acid turns out to be a medium-chain triglyceride, and that's the predominant one in coconut oil. And capric acid is a saturated one, and it's found in coconut and palm oil and a few others. So you have some examples of fats, oils that are high in saturated fat on your plate. So what I'd like everyone to do is just go ahead and let's taste one. Just get a little bit on your spoon, put it on your tongue, or on your finger onto your tongue.
Saturated fats are solid at room temperature?
Yes, saturated fats tend to be solid at room temperature and tend to have great shelf lives. So, I'm going to combine my mindful eating talk with some of my stuff here. So, you put this on the tip of your tongue. You need to work it back to the back of your tongue. We have different taste buds that taste things differently. Trying to think about what you're tasting. So, how many people pick the red one first, or the orange one? Okay. So, between them, because you are refined fat tasters, you must cleanse the palate like you do when you're tasting wine. And it turns out when you're tasting fats, you can go online, by the way, and become a certified olive oil taster for $350. Anyways, you cleanse your palate by taking a bite of a green apple between fats. That's how you do it. So just take a little bite of your green apple, that's why you have it, then you can taste the next one. And you can do that while I'm talking here. Medium chain triglycerides. Anybody remember why those are important?
They're easier, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
They're easier to absorb.
Yes. So a fat is absorbed out of the intestines and gets run through the chylomicron system into our lymph system, slowly circulates around, finally gets itself to the liver where it gets used. Medium chain triglycerides are mainlined, straight absorption, straight through the intestines, straight to the liver where they're used in other places. Some people think that makes them more energy efficient and actually give more energy than a long chain triglyceride. And there are some claims that it is more helpful for us. So coconut oil, if you put your plate so that the red oil is at the 12 o'clock position, the coconut oil should be to your left at like the 9 o'clock position. Those are the triglycerides that are in coconut oil. You see lauric acid is the main predominant one there. So, saturated fats. So they've been called good, they've been called bad, but by God, they're tasty. And that's why we love them. So in 1980, somewhere around most of your birthdays probably, or just predating them, the USDA declared saturated fat and dietary cholesterol as bad. And we were told to get that out of our diets. I remember Time magazine front page, it showed 2 eggs sunny side up, 2 strips of bacon, a glass of orange juice, a cup of coffee, and it said, "The American breakfast is killing us." Partially hydrogenated vegetable oil was declared good. Anybody know how they make partially hydrogenated vegetable oil? You subject it to pressure, you heat it up, and you blast in hydrogen, and you have a rod of some kind of a metal like nickel, and that puts hydrogen on top of those double bonds and breaks those double bonds. So it eliminates some of the double bonds in saturated fat. So it was the food industry's logical conclusion to get rid of the saturated fat, and we'll just take some polyunsaturated fats and we'll make them look almost like saturated fats. So we can use those. 2005, the problem is when you do that, you can make a double bonded fatty acid and get rid of one of the bonds, you're left with one. It can look just like, and in fact it is, oleic acid, monounsaturated fat. But when you do it the way we do it in the factory, they almost all come out as trans, not cis. But trans fat was not a saturated fat, and so the amount of trans fats in our foods were not required to be disclosed. And finally, in 2005, we found out they increased LDL in heart disease. 2006, there was required labeling. They gave the food industry lots of time to figure this out so they could try and get rid of it. And in 2009, the city of New York just said they wanted no trans fat in any of the food in the city. So you're seeing trans fat eliminated from a lot of things. So back to the world consumption of oil. You can see there's a big difference between what the world does and what the U.S. does. So U.S., 75% of our edible oil consumption is soybean oil. Now, anybody been to the grocery store and find a bottle that says soybean oil? Anybody? Is there soybean oil on the shelf? Think so? Yeah, there is. It's just not called soybean oil. It's called vegetable oil. So if you look at it, you'll find that's where most of our soybean oil is. A little bit of palm oil, a little bit of rapeseed oil. That's an interesting story. Canola oil. Did any of you know that there is no such thing as a canola plant or a canola seed? So it's called rapeseed. It looks like, if you look, when you're driving on the roads, you see like 3-foot tall weeds with yellow tops to them. Those are not rape seeds, but they look very similar to that. And they grow like crazy in Europe, and they grow like crazy in Canada. So when they found out you could get seeds and grind it down and get an oil out of that, problem was it tasted really nasty, and they had to do some things to get rid of that nastiness to it. They realized rapeseed was not a very good marketable name. So what makes the oil taste nasty in rapeseed is a uracil acid. So they decided they could do a process and they could make that really low. So they had then low uric acid rapeseed oil with the initials Lear. And the marketing team came back and said, Lear oil is not a whole lot better than rapeseed oil. So the Canadians said, well, we'll call it Canadian low acid. And that's how it got the name canola. So it's really rapeseed. Coconut oil, we don't do much of that. Corn oil, and then lard and tallow are animal fats. So ours looks very different than the rest of the world's oil consumption. So let's move on to the unsaturated ones and the polyunsaturated ones. So while I'm doing this, you sort of one by one can test the little drinks of oil. So this isn't going to kill you. Remember, it's 120 calories for a tablespoon. So if you just do, enough to get in your mouth, kind of swish it around, push your tongue up against the back of your teeth, get a taste of it. I would say do the one that's labeled A last. And I will tell you that some of these oils you're drinking have a lot of monounsaturated fat. Those are the oleic acid. Chemically, omega something, you read all about this, omega-3, omega-6, omega-9. It just means where the first double bond is working from the end. So in the 9th position, there's one double bond on this 18-chain fatty acid oleic acid. Linoleic acid has 2 double bonds, and the first one comes at carbon 6, counting from the end. Those are omega-6s. And then linoleic acid has 3 double bonds, and the first double bond comes at the 3rd carbon in, and that's why it's called an omega-3. So that's the content of those oils. And here's olive oil. And the mix and match of those 3 fatty acids, you can see oleic acid pops up almost everywhere in the top 5. And that's why olive oil is the sort of king of monounsaturated fats. Now, I think it is important to see how olive oil is made.
Iris won't fall asleep. That's because Iris is a more advanced. She's a suspected detective scientist addressing olive oil is an essential in any kitchen for the health-conscious gourmet.
Does it sound like the 2 things are cousins? Anybody know what's happening there?
There's somebody that adds to like,
traditional method involves collecting oils in tiny flakes, but it's not very efficient. For a crop like the one in this farm, most particular oils used instead. Machines surround each tree and dry sheets. It's not very efficient. For a farm like this farm, machines surround each tree and dry sheets. The branches.
Okay, we're going to go forward here. So it shakes the olives off the trees, and then takes them immediately to the plant, and that going directly from the tree to the oil making process is part of what makes things virgin olive oil. Those olives don't sit around. And then it goes through a process where it takes out the twigs and the other stuff that gets shaken off the olive tree.
The more stubborn twigs and branches that remain are filtered out using a quill, which only allows the fruit to pass through. Because the quality oil out of the fridge compressed as soon as possible.
Yeah, I've probably seen this thing 10 times and never heard double sound over it, so I apologize. So then some dude shovels all these olives that are just olives into this pressing auger. And what it does, it grinds up the olive and the seed in the middle that we like to spit out, grinds the whole thing up. And the first picture you saw was using those big old stones, and that's a more modern grinder wheel. And then it takes this mash and stirs it, and as it stirs it, the oil rises to the top, and you'll hear the term cold pressed, which means that it is not heated at all. So it's just left at room temperature. It can't get above, I think, 27 degrees. Then they take this mash and they put it between these mats, and they stick it in this press, and it puts all that down together, and then the oil comes out. And it comes out that little pipe there, and it looks pretty good. And I'll stop it there. So you got the idea. It's a very old-fashioned process. Might be some new machines, but it's basically take the olives, mash them up, mash them again, and the oil comes out, and that's it.
Yeah, just exit out of that one, and you're probably going to stay.
So that's, I can tell you that not all of the oils are made that way. Yeah, X out of that. So, monounsaturated fats, I think that if there's any universal agreement inside the literature, is that monounsaturated fats are good for you. You won't find many articles that say they're not. Polyunsaturates, whole nother discussion. So there's the omega-3 and the omega-6s. Now they're both essential fatty acids. We have to have them. We can't make them. We have to eat them. And we need them to do things like form eicosanoids, vital building blocks in our inflammatory response. Those fatty acids are also incorporated into chemicals that are in receptors, and they're incorporated into things that help us open up and translate and transcribe DNA. So we got to have these things. It's the amount of one versus the other. So this is again one of those things where one is not all bad. If it's an essential, how can it be bad? We have to have it. And one's not all good. So the omega-3 is the favored one right now. And that's in the linolenic acid. It's got an anti-inflammatory effect, can lower everything, including your HDL. And it's a lot of talk about the ratio of your 3s to your 6s. And there's talk that the ideal ratio is omega-6 to omega-3 being 2 to 1 or 4 to 1. Unfortunately, most of what we eat is like 6 or 20 to 1. I don't know, I won't say unfortunately, I'll just say that's the way it is. So the omega-6s, this is a mixed bag because they do go on to form arachidonic acid, which are pro-inflammatory, pro-thrombotic, but they also get converted to the gamma form, which is anti-inflammatory. So it's not a completely all is good, all is bad picture. So the American Heart Association said we got to weigh in on this whole omega acid stuff because it's confusing people, and they gave the very confusing recommendation and conclusion. It says advice to reduce omega-6 polyunsaturated fatty acids or PUFAs is typically framed as a call to lower the ratio. Although increasing omega-3 PUFA tissue levels does reduce the risk for coronary heart disease, it does not follow that decreasing omega-6 levels will do the same. So, what they're saying is there have been some studies that show that giving you more omega-3s, which would improve that ratio, helps. But there's not been a study yet that says that getting rid of the 6s and creating the same ratio does the same. Ice cream and crime in Detroit. So this is a big study that went back and looked at this whole thing about polyunsaturated fatty acids. So this is a hazard ratio. So if the lines touch 1, that means what? Significant or not significant? Not significant. That means this one's not significant, and it's as not significant as that one is not significant. Okay? So let's be clear about that. So here's the interventions in the studies, the dietary studies, that looked at adding linoleic acid, which is an omega-6, to the diet. And it looked like most of them, and even the summary one, shows no difference. And the outcome here is cardiovascular death. This one looks at just giving people more polyunsaturated fatty acids in whatever proportion they come in, but not selectively taking 3s, not just, you got 6s and 3s together. And they show, again, about the same. It doesn't really make a huge statistical difference in cardiovascular death as the output. So this is part of the slippery truth of oils, is there's not one that's all good and all bad. So let's get down to the more practical. So the smoke point of oil. So that's the temperature at which enough volatile compounds start coming out of the oil and it creates a smoke. And typically it's like described as a bluish gray smoke. The smoke contains water because the heat is boiling off the water, because the smoke point is usually well above the boiling point of water. There's free fatty acids in there and degradation products of oxidation. And the higher the smoke point, the higher the achievable safe cooking temperature. So if something has a low smoke point, like 250 degrees, but you want to cook your meat at 300, you're not going to want to use that for cooking because you're going to be beyond the smoke point and you're going to be drastically changing the quality of the oil. So, oils are most often chosen by cooks based on their taste and their smoke points. And that's how they decide what oil they're going to get. Health benefits aside. So I just put butter up here because remember, on your birthday, the government declared butter is bad. Well, it's got 26% monounsaturated fats, oleic acid, 4% polyunsaturated, 64% saturated with a smoke point of 300. It's got a 6-month shelf life if you keep it refrigerated. Not bad. So here's the alternatives out there. Coconut oil. A lot more saturated. You don't even need refrigeration for coconut oil. One of our coworkers says they like coconut oil because they can put some in the pan. If anything's left on their hands, they just rub it on their skin. Red palm oil, which was the red oil that you tasted. High beta carotene, that's why it's reddish orange. 1 year shelf life, deep refrigerated. Macadamia nut oil. Interestingly, I went to the supermarket and got bad pictures with my cell phone. Went back 3 days later, and they completely redid the oil section of, like, I call it the hippie aisle at Martin's, where you can buy all that stuff. And macadamia nut oil's gone. It was $18 a bottle. I think they got rid of it because nobody bought it. But look how good that one is. Packed with monounsaturated fats, not much saturated fats. 2 year shelf life, no refrigeration. Good high smoke point, but it's $18 for a bottle this big. And then avocado oil. How cool is this? A bacon-like flavor when heated. Anything that tastes like bacon has to be good. So then there's the moderate heat, and this is what most of us use. So this is sauteing, stir-frying sauces. You can use it for baking too. There's your extra virgin olive oil. The extra virgin part refers to the fact that the olive's picked and it's crushed into oil right away, and then it's all about the taste and quality of it. So there's desirable qualities, and they've got words just like the wine people have words, and they have undesirable traits, and they have to have like 5 desirable and no more than 1 undesirable trait. Canola oil, walnut oil, could not find walnut oil in Berkeley or Jefferson County, and sesame oil. So again, smoke points. So these can be used for cooking at what most people would say are not high temperatures. So you wouldn't use this for deep frying. And then these are the cold uses. So this is the things you can use to make your sauces and to make your salad dressing or to pour on just with vinegar or without vinegar. So there's your extra virgin olive oil again. Flaxseed, tremendously high in monounsaturates. Trouble is, it's got a really short shelf life. You have to keep it refrigerated. It's very high in omega-3s. Of the 28% of polyunsaturates, most of them are omega-3s. Walnut oil, again, looks good, but couldn't find any. And toasted sesame oil doesn't have a whole lot of omega-3s. It has omega-6s in it, but it's got a lot of monounsaturated, and it's not very saturated. So that's confusing enough. So everyone's tasted during this B, C, and D. Okay? So now, after you've had a little bite of apple, taste A. So, again, smell it. And you can, for $10 online, buy an official oil tasting glass. They like to use these little blue glasses, so you're not biased by the color, because color has nothing to do with the quality of oil, turns out. And then you put it on your tongue, and you push your tongue against the back of your front teeth, and you breathe, so you can smell it more better that way. Kind of swish it around a little bit. So was there a difference between A and the other ones? Anybody? Are you all in a taste bud coma?
I like it.
So what?
I don't know if I'm biased by
Use
the
some
color.
words.
I'm not gonna have to listen to those wine guys a little more.
So does it,
Aroma, it's got a good smell.
so it smells like, did the other three smell like anything? That one smelled like something.
It smells like my uncle's farm in Sicily where he has the first press.
Okay. For those of you who've not been to his uncle's farm, what did it taste like?
I think this is like my uncle's farm.
What did it taste like?
It tastes like what we use at home all the time.
It does or does not?
It does, I mean.
It does.
or-
Okay. So there's a definite difference in taste. All right. So we're going to go back now and talk about a little bit of the bad biochemistry of oils. So oxidation causes free radicals. Free radicals are bad. They get involved with inflammation, mitochondrial dysfunction, DNA disruption, all that. Okay. Oxidation creates hydroperoxides, which these are the ones that cause things to have an off flavor or to smell bad or to make an oil turn rancid. So the chemistry just shows how, free radicals are designated by the little asterisks there, and they can come off of wherever the hydrogen is lost. Now the causes of oxidation are oxygen exposure, light exposure, and heat exposure. So 3 things cause oxidation of oils. And those oils, once they're oxidized, you can add oxygen to the free radical, or you can add hydrogen, and you can create these peroxy radicals and hydroperoxides. And those are the things that screw up the taste of oils. So the bad chemistry of oil, and I love this little one here. You can't see it very well, but these are little oil droplets with rifles on them. They're free radicals. They're being released from the pan because it has been overheated past its smoke point. So these volatile aldehydes, which Adrian mentioned, acrolein is one of them. That's what it is, a very innocuous looking thing. Turns out to be not very good for us. And no matter what oil it is, if it's coconut oil, which is very saturated, or extra virgin olive oil, which is very unsaturated, the higher the temperature you make the oil, the more of these acrolein products are given off into the air, and those are felt to be carcinogenic. So, to keep your oils healthy, we all want healthy oils. Avoid excessive light exposure. So, who cares about olive oil more than the Italians? Mark, what color are the bottles of the olive oil that your wife buys?
It's usually in a can.
So you get it in a can.
And you keep it in the little.
So anybody who buys olive oil in a bottle, what color is the bottle?
Dark green.
Dark green, right. So, why are the other oils kept in clear plastic? What's that?
Light oxidation.
Because it's cheaper. There's no reason. It'll oxidize if you keep it out there in the light. Avoid storing in heat. Don't store your cooking oils above the stove and where you're running the oven and making them hot all the time. Heat causes oxidation, causes free radicals, causes you to lose some of the antioxidants that you have in the oil. This one I never thought of, but it was advised to date your opening to avoid using past the shelf life. So I had to go out and buy some oils here because you wouldn't believe how old some of the oils were that I found on our shelves. Don't buy more than you need. Evidently, the Cucazellas need a lot because they buy it in these cans, like gas cans. But if you're gonna, I would never use that amount in the 6 months of the shelf life of olive oil once you open the container. So I would have to throw it out if I were paying attention to it. And then keep your heat below the smoking point. So something's going to get ready to smoke. If you've ever poured oil on a pan, as it heats up, it starts to shake or shimmer. Just past that's when the smoke's going to start coming off. So you want to add your vegetables or whatever when the oil starts shimmering. And then don't reuse deep frying. You fry it once, you've made all those free radicals. You use it again, you heat it up again, you release even more, and it just degrades the oil more and more. This is a criticism of fast food, but who knows how often they're changing those vegetable oils. So, I hope that this one works a little bit better. One thing, don't flip it quickly.
For the health-conscious gourmet,
no
there's
way.
one ingredient that's sure to set the taste
That's
buds
too bad.
sizzling. From
How do I get rid of
frying
this,
to
Joe?
salad dressing, olive oil is an
What do you
essential
need?
for any modern kitchen.
Oh, this is the one, I didn't get to show my one thing.
A wide variety of grades and flavors are available, but they all have one thing in common. No.
Okay. So I won't get to show you that, but you have to see the movie if you haven't. I hope your generation has. City Slickers. So the main cowboy there says the secret of life is one thing, and you have to find that one thing. So in our quest to find the one thing, the United States Department of Agriculture, controlled by agriculture interests, issues a food pyramid laden with foods that predisposes millions of Americans to perish from cardiovascular disease. This is our attempt to look for the one thing. This is U.S. fat and oil consumption in food. So, 1980, butter is bad. This is pounds of fat per U.S. citizen. Look at butter. Butter is down here, that one. We eat the same amount of butter. But in the response to butter is bad, we spawned this generation of these oils, like canola oil, rapeseed oil. And we made margarine. Margarine, which was popular when it came on board, it is the alternative to butter. Turned out it was really not good stuff, and the consumption's gone down. But salad and cooking oil, look at the rise in salad and cooking oil. And it mirrors the rise, and it is responsible for why we are eating so much fat and oil in our country. I'm not saying whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, but we need to look at what that is. And most of what that is soybean oil and corn oil, which are processed oils. They are not made like the olive oil. Crops planted in the United States, and this does not include hay, soybean, corn, high fructose corn syrup, and cooking oil. So we have been on this quest for zero trans fat. By the way, if something says zero trans fat, it's not zero trans fat. There was a consensus made at a big meeting, and they said as long as it's less than 0.5 gram per serving, you can call it zero trans. So we're still eating trans fats. So in a response, again, to the government saying, whoa, wait a minute, these trans fats are bad, get rid of them, our food industry has well-intentions tried to step up to the plate like they did in 1980 and solve this trans fat issue. So what they've done is they said, well, we can take subsidized, highly produced, cheaply corn oil and soybean oil, and we can hydrogenate it differently. Not use a chemical catalyst so we can reduce the heat and reduce the pressure that we do it under. And when they do that, they're able to make less trans forms of fatty acids and more cis. And then there is this thing that they're calling trait modified oils. So you can buy sunflower oil, which is typically does not have much monounsaturated fat, and get high oleic acid sunflower oil. Rapeseed oil that's high oleic acid and low linoleic acid, and soybean oil like that. So how do you think that they trait modified the oils? This has got the Europeans in a twist. Anybody? You all would have done very badly in the School of Animal Science. They did it by genetic engineering of the seeds. And so there is a large portion of countries that do not want any genetic modification of their food because we don't know. So this stuff is going to be subjected to the same randomized prospective trials in our population for their cardiovascular outcomes that trans fats were, which means not at all. So I don't know what the slippery slope of the new generation of cooking oils holds for us. It will say it's got more monounsaturated and less of the omega-6s, but I don't know, no one knows if that's going to result in better health outcomes. Does this make sense? So there is this emerging discussion, and you've heard it used in different ways today, called food synergy. So when you look on a label and it says, I don't know, iron, what does it say after it, Dr. Canarella? If you read something that says iron, it says what after it? So many milligrams, and then what does it say? Anybody? Percent of the USDA requirement. So our view of nutrition has started from the view of deficiency. So we find these people that have weak bones, and we find they're vitamin D deficient, and then we establish what the minimum amount of vitamin D is they need so their bones don't break. And we've done that for a multitude of nutrients in the last several decades. But that's very different than looking at what deficiency nutrient angle versus the whole food or what is nutrition angle. So to talk about food synergy, which is the action of health food compounds within foods working together in diet patterns. And this is felt to be important because food is complex, non-random mixtures that have been developed under evolutionary control. Mark said it different ways with his slides, but it's the same message. So we talk about nutrients, but nutrients come from foods. And my sort of view from looking at this stuff now for about a year is we really don't know what supplying people extra nutrients does. And our one experiment with trans fat was not a good one. So I think looking at how we can get all these things in whole foods is an important concept. So, sometimes you go to a conference and it's like a week long, someone stands up and says one sentence and says, if you get this, you get the conference, you can go out and go to the beach or wherever you want. They did this at a 1 week conference I went to. Eat food, mostly plants, not too much. You get that, see you later. Come around when we have some of the mixers. It's a haiku by Michael Pollan, who's been a great writer about this. And eating foods, we mean whole foods, mostly plants, not exclusively plants, but mostly, and then not too much. And then I'll end with this one. When I was 32, when I started MedChefs, I started cooking. Until then, I just ate. So hopefully, with this curriculum, you will start cooking and end your just eating and be able to incorporate some of this into your life as well as the life of your patients. And on that, I will close. So the door prizes go to anyone who can guess these oils. So your choices are olive oil, peanut oil, canola oil, and almond oil. So you can take a little piece of paper and write down what you think each of those are. So it's peanut, almond, canola, and olive oil.